Hello, every folks, and good morning. So, got a little bit of news here today, namely that Final Fantasy Tactics got mentioned, which I know, low friggin' bar as far as that goes, but a few things could potentially be inferred from what we've seen so far, and that's what I wanted to discuss here. So, there was an interview recently that was done with three folks here: Naoki Yoshida, Takeya Kujiroka, and Michael Christopher Koji, Fox, sorry, on the, apparently on a DLC for which one of these? FF16 here. So, here's the thing. Personally, I don't know very much about FF16 or 14. Frankly, I just don't have the time to get into, a new MMO these days. But, as far as all this stuff goes, these are folks that have been around, just as far as a lot of different games for a very, very long time. Naoki Yoshida here in particular was basically one of the folks that was sticking by Matsuno for a lot of the projects that he was working on for a while. Apparently, it was a lifelong dream of his to actually make this DLC for this Final Fantasy MMO here for quite a long time, just so he could go make a game with the guy. So basically, what was said here during this whole interview, if we can go ahead and take a look here real quick, because I'm jumping between tabs, is so. Basically, what they were asking was, we asked as well about Final Fantasy Tactics as the base for a new Tactics title, but Yoshida, Kujiroka, and Fox all agreed that its scale may not be the best choice for a revival. What would we even call it? Fox laughs. Final Fantasy 16 Tactics? That's a lot. We have a lot of our staff who worked on previous games like Final Fantasy Tactics or Final Fantasy 12, so you're going to have a lot of that Tactics feel because a lot of the same people are on the team, Yoshida explained. We're very happy for you to suggest this because we're all fans. But if we're going to make this, we wouldn't want to do the same story that turns out to be a different story. And a few notes about this, because first of all, I don't know if that's actually a dig at FF7 Remake or not, because I know some folks got upset about that, and it seemed like immediately after the FF7 Remake, folks getting mad and whatever else, there was a little bit of a note that was thrown in for Tactics Ogre Reborn, essentially saying that we're not 100% sure if we're going to make everyone happy, kind of a thing. Now, or specifically, there was a little bit of a mention saying that they specifically didn't change anything with the original story in order to try to not mess with anything. Now, again, this could just be kind of digging too far into a particular comment, but, and these are obviously two different people saying this, but I just found it kind of interesting. Anyway, so, continuing on here, so he says, when thinking about the scope of the project from a strictly size perspective, Yoshida was laughing again, continuing, how would we even do the econ versus econ battles in that style? By the way, a bit of a personal note, I don't know what that is. The FFMMOs are just not something that I get into yet. So if you have those, how many squares is an econ going to be? You'd have to have more people out there as well, so what about the wait time in between? But the series does lend itself that well to that kind of storytelling, and we love tactics as well. It's probably about time that we do a new one. Now, a few things on this. So, a few notes. First and foremost, as far as making a new one, what's interesting about this is specifically nobody said anything about remaking FF Tactics. Now, there have been hints about an FF Tactics remake for a decently long time. A bunch of random references that suddenly started appearing all over the place for seemingly no reason, as well as the original director for it, Matsuno there, who's been essentially joking about how he should go and rebalance certain characters for a while. So either way, it seemed a bit weird that there were so many hints about it being dropped only for, oftentimes the answer just to simply be, or the official answer to simply be, well, I guess we're not doing anything there. It seemed a little bit odd, was the thing. Anyways, so with that being said, I want to point out something that he specifically, again, mentions making another one rather than remaking the original. Now, the reason that I find this significant is the fact that there actually have been quite a decent few Final Fantasy Tactics games, and many of the folks that I talked to are not aware of this. Many folks thought that it was just Final Fantasy Tactics, it showed up on its own, was a happy little unicorn of its own right, and then just nothing ever happened with it. How dare they not make another one? They actually made several of them, and in fact, there actually was a lot of ping-ponging back and forth between Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy Tactics, and that... Alrighty, so, got a little bit sidetracked there, so let's go ahead and discuss what this could potentially mean. See, there were actually quite a few Final Fantasy Tactics games. We actually had not just FFT, and it's surprising to me that so many folks that were kind of fans of FFT never actually looked into the other games whatsoever and/or just dismissed them. But there actually were quite a few games in that sort of same train of thought there. You had the original FFT, sure, but then you also, obviously, I mean, War of the Lions, I don't think you'd count as a different game. But then you had the Tactics Ogre remake on PSP, which this is a modded version of that you're looking at right now. This later got changed into kind of its own identity with Tactics Ogre Reborn. You had Tactics Advance, you had Tactics A2, you had Vagrant Story. There were a lot of kind of games in that vein. I guess technically there were also those mobile games, but I personally don't count those. I've heard Brave Exodus is good. Apparently, Yoshida here was actually involved in that one as well. The other one, the like War of the Visions or whatever else, was I freaking hated that one. But either way, to each their own, you know. Whatever you count, you count. But Final Fantasy Tactics specifically has been remade a ton of times. It has been. It's been essentially put on was put on PSP originally, was put on iOS, was put on iPads, was put on friggin' everything under the sun, and frankly, every time that it was taken out of the oven, it got a little bit more rotten, which was a massive bummer, because the original version was a friggin' masterpiece. Yeah, some of the translation was a little bit weird, but at the same time, a lot of the kind of punch of the game came from its sound design. That came from, you know, like units specifically going and pulling somebody up by the collar, and specifically having a different sound for that. The punchiness of all the hits and cutscenes, the way that the music had a lot of reverb to it and whatever else. There was a lot to that PS1 version that made it incredibly memorable. But when it came out on PSP, it lost a little bit of that because the reverb on the sound was gone. The death sounds were completely different. The sounds from the hits were essentially just suddenly missing layers for no apparent reason and stuff like that. I mean, they did add new classes and such, but in general, personally, I thought that it was cool that they added the new stuff there, but really hated the sound on that one. Oftentimes, I would play it on mute, despite the fact that I absolutely loved the soundtrack. Just because of how off the sound seemed, you know. Now let's go ahead and continue on here. So obviously they kept trying to improve it little by little. By the time it got to iPad and iOS, Android, all of that kind of thing, they changed it so that instead of having insane amounts of lag, that it would do this thing where it tried to kind of fast forward every time it got to a laggy section. They added 3D graphics to the maps. Kind of, they got this sort of like clay doll looking situation. Either way, it was, you know what, the mobile version, I'd say for most folks, is good enough of a entry point to get somebody into it, but in general, it again just somehow came out less baked every time it came out of the oven. Now, that said, when it came to the other versions, or the other games in that particular series, again, oftentimes I feel like they're a little bit undersung. Vagrant Story is an absolute cinematic masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. Like the actual, hell, just go watch the initial cutscene and tell me you don't want to play every second of that game. It's amazing that you don't hear it brought up as much as, you know, it seems like it deserves, because yeah, it's cinematically it is insanely good looking. In terms of its gameplay, it's confusing but worth your time. Basically, it's an odd thing of like, if you liked MGS level kind of cinematics, actually arguably way better than MGS, but you know, to each their own. So you got that mixed with kind of like classic dungeon crawler kind of stuff, but at the same time, you've also got the systems that would later be used for Tactics Ogre PSP and Tactics Ogre Reborn, which again, Reborn made them more sane. It's a system that's very confusing to explain to people. Like, you know, why is it that this unit is doing so much more to this one? Well, you see, their armor is resisting this much, but their absolute racism against dragons is going and resisting it this much. But also the fact that the weather is affecting their footing is affecting their accuracy over here, which is, it's like, by the time you're done explaining, they've already fallen asleep 3 separate times, you know? But that being said, let's talk about Tactics Advance and Tactics A2, because I feel those don't get the love they deserve either. For those that have never tried them because they thought they looked like kiddie games or whatever else, please, or hell, even those ones that played it as kids and were part of that crowd that insisted, like, no, this is just for babies, I'm too big and manly for this thing. Please give it another look, because those games, again, did way more cool stuff than they get credit for, and it always makes me sad to see folks write them off. Because, okay, so Tactics Advance in particular, right? Like they say, oh, it's just a cutesy little story. Okay, so it's a cutesy story about a kid who's essentially helping out their friend, who essentially is a broke alcoholic, who's in severe debt, that is trying to live out an escapist fantasy due to the fact that their life is completely fucked. Because their legs are broken, they're suffering from a crippling disease. Again, their dad is an alcoholic, their mom is dead, and they're living in the ghetto. And yeah, they're a real happy, feel-good story there. But no, the actual premise of that game, if you revisit it as an adult, is way darker than you remember it being. And frankly, a lot of the stuff that's going on there is more so an acceptance of trauma than it is, trying to go and destroy their happy fantasy world because they feel like messing with their friend or what have you. Again, there's a lot more subtext to that story than it originally seems, so definitely revisit it at some point if you feel like there needs to be specifically only another Final Fantasy Tactics and not another advanced game. 8.2 in particular is also similarly just as much about class warfare as it was back in FFT, with the fact that if somebody is of the wrong class and they can't essentially become well-renowned enough to get themselves a judge, they're subject to death. Everybody else is functionally immortal. Go to the ghetto, everybody can die. Again, it's a thing that's available in both of those games, but it's just kind of interesting that gets overlooked so often, that there is a pretty noticeable thing for that. Like, there's a moment when one of your main characters actually ends up leaving the party for a little bit, because he ends up going to go do something illegal, basically, and lo and behold, what ends up happening? He ends up getting shot and almost dies. Because he was not protected under the law, but for a brief moment there. But again, it's a very, very interesting kind of series of games there. So really consider revisiting those at some point. Now, I feel like a lot of this is kind of coming ripe off the heels of Unicorn Overlord doing particularly well, considering that, it just happened. This interview just dropped a couple days ago. By the way, I apologize that I was about a day late to this. I actually did originally have this one out a day ago, and then when I was re-listening to it, I realized that, yeah, the audio was scuffed. Even more so than usual, so there's that. So, either way, what I think that we'll end up seeing out of all of this is, again, something more akin to maybe a side story off of FF16, or maybe we'll just end up seeing something entirely different. I certainly am shocked that they haven't, they've cyberpunkified everything else. I would not be shocked if we ended up getting some sort of a cyberpunk version of FF Tactics. It feels like it would be very appropriate, so again, that's kind of my 2 cents. It would be freaking awesome to see that. Please do it. Show Front Mission how it's done, because that series is just living off of remakes and has not remade Front Mission 3 yet, or something similar to Front Mission 3, so please do that at some point. Anyway, so that being said, hopefully that helps to kind of spread the word on this a little bit, that maybe we'll be getting a Tactics Remake and a Tactics Advance. Or maybe just one of them, or maybe none of them. I don't friggin' know. But I'm hoping that this all translates to maybe one of both, because I loved the Tactics Advance series. It's, again, extremely undersung in my book. I loved Final Fantasy Tactics, and I wish that more stuff would be done of it. If you are looking for something to scratch that FFT itch, by the way, you don't need to only have stuff with Tactics in the name. Please bear in mind that we have the absolutely amazing Fell Seal that came out a few years ago that basically refined the FFT actual gameplay mechanics into something really customizable and fun. Bear in mind that its story is kind of just there to do its job, but it's serviceable enough. It's mostly there just to give you the fun team building shenanigans and whatnot. So either way, that's a hell of a lot of different threads to pull on here. Additionally, if you've never played Vagrant Story, if you're an FFT fan and you've never played its sequel, go and stop punishing yourself. Go play Vagrant Story. That game is amazing. Stick with it though. It's more complex than it seems. It's got a lot of complication to its systems, and it definitely has actually a lot of similarities. I know you're probably tired of hearing this comparison, but it's got a lot of similarities to Dark Souls in that. Basically, unless you're in a particularly dramatic area, a lot of the time, it's actually just dead silent, and you're just listening to the ambiance and figuring out where the hell you're supposed to be going. But yeah, absolutely god-tier game. Also, not that many games that decide, you know what? this spear, or this piece of this dagger is actually really darn good against dragons, or ghosts or whatever. And you know what? This spear is pretty awesome. I'm just going to go ahead and take the head off the spear, shove this dagger on there, and now I have a, custom anti-ghost spear or whatever else. And then just, give it a stupid name, like Stabtastic, like I did. Or, you got the, you can just go ahead and make a pebble crossbow that's all modified to be really good against people, and then you just call it gun. But either way, very fun game, bizarrely about like 90% of it is just exploring and customizing your weapons to suit the enemies that you're fighting. Very strange game, very fun game. Give it a look at some time if you haven't. And yeah, if you're looking for more of that FF Tactics feel in the meantime, obviously, you definitely want to go check out Tactics Ogre Reborn. There's also Tactics Ogre One Vision. There's also Fellseal. There's also Unicorn Overlord, which if you haven't tried that yet, God help you, go do it right now. Yeah, there's the old FF Tactics Advance at A2. As mentioned, Vagrant Story. Funnily enough, there was even another spin-off, kind of, sort of, of Vagrant Story. There was Crimson Shroud. I don't even know how to begin describing that one right now, and I have no way to record it, so that's just going to be a thread for another day, but yeah. That's about that. That is your weird ramble on effectively 2 lines of text from an interview on something completely different, and I'm hoping maybe somebody finds this fun. Okay, y'all have yourselves a good one. I gotta get back to it. Take care.